Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beautiful Days Journeys of Hope, a live stream series featuring refugees telling their stories. My name is Rebecca Garland, and I work at Beautiful Day, a social enterprise that runs a gourmet granola and coffee business to provide job training for refugees. I'm here tonight with special guest Maliss Coletta. Maliss is originally from Cambodia and works as a consultant for our refugee youth program. Last week, Maliss shared about her experiences fleeing Cambodia in the early 1980s, following a genocide by the Khmer Rouge that killed 1/3 of the population. She told us about leaving Cambodia and traveling through Thailand, mostly on foot, with her family, enduring thieves and crocodiles and many narrow escapes. She ended her account last week in the Philippines, where her family finally received asylum and were applying to the US to be accepted as refugees. She has generously agreed to return this week and tell us about the next steps in her journey from the Philippines to the US and on. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight, Maliss.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, we're really glad to have you. Maybe you can just begin by telling us, right now we are in the Philippines, so did your family apply for asylum to many countries or just to the United States?
Well, before I start, I like to say hello to my biggest fan. Hi, Sarika. Hi, Devi. So to answer your question, Rebecca, the United States was our first choice because we have family in Rhode Island. But since Canada resettled the most refugees and did not have as many requirements at that time, Canada was our second choice, just in case the United States denied us.
What were the requirements that the United States had?
One of the requirements I remember consisted of physical and mental health evaluations. I was afraid I wouldn't pass because I was always a sickly child. My mother called me her miracle baby.
Oh my goodness. How long did the process take to get asylum and what did it involve?
The process of getting an asylum and how long it took depended on the refugee camp itself. The refugee camps that were more established, with staffing and other resources and support, ensure protocols and procedures are followed correctly that are required by the host or the country you are applying for. And also, having a sponsor makes all the difference in terms of waiting time. A sponsor means the family will not depend on the state or the country's assistance for financial, emotional, social, and resettlement support needed to integrate into a new country once they arrive. So for those who don't have private sponsors, they may have had a different wait time and possibly different requirements.
I do know from talking to other refugees in the past that some end up staying in refugee camps for years, sometimes even decades.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like having a sponsor was really an advantage.
Right.
What was it like in the Philippines while you were waiting? And what did you do there? And where did you live? And how long did it take? Can you just give us a little bit of a background as to what it was like there?
Sure. So we live in the camps for about 4 months. It was quite different from any other refugee camps we lived prior. The condition was by far the most humane. We felt safe for the first time. We weren't hungry. The shelter did what it was supposed to. And I don't remember barbed wire fencing around the camp. I felt free to play around, and we were even allowed to go on excursions. For instance, in this photo, to a nearby waterfall for a swim.
That's a really cool picture. Where are you in there?
I am way back there in the waterfall.
Looking like you're having a great time.
Yes, we did. It was exhilarating to be able to move around freely and and not be confined in a camp, inside a camp.
What was your fondest memory at the camp?
So the fondest memory of the camp was of my father and his clay oven. He built a clay oven to make bread. He would make fresh bread every morning in the shape of animals, and I would deliver and sell it on my bike around the camp. People would smell the bread every morning, and before we knew it, we had more customers than what we could make.
It sounds like you had a really good experience. I remember last week when you were talking about the refugee camps in Thailand, and you showed pictures of them with barbed wire fences around them, and they just looked very primitive and sometimes even scary. So it looks like you were in a pretty good position here. And I'm just wondering, did you go to school?
The camp didn't provide any kind of formal education. Well, in many cases, including our family, we had to falsify our age so that we can make up for the years lost with our education. For example, any schooling I had prior was in the first grade in Cambodia, and from 1984 to 87, I had none. So in order for me to be able to catch up was to reduce my age. My actual age is older than what is on paper. So yes, I have two different birthdays. Until this day, my husband still gets confused as to which one to celebrate. But the camp did provide crash courses on what to expect when we got to America. We learned basic English, enough words to be able to answer basic questions and to navigate the airport or the supermarket. So this is a photo. This photo shows the class my mother participated in. She's one of the women way in the back next to the blackboard, and it taught her and her classmates some English and about American ways.
What did you already know about the United States? I often wonder, what the US's reputation is among refugees.
We knew what America was from movies, stories, letters, pictures from family who were living in the States. We were told it's a land of opportunity. If you work hard enough, you will get anything you need and want. For me, skyscrapers, beautiful city lights, and very well-dressed people living in New York City were the images that I had in my head of America.
So what were your first thoughts when you learned that you were actually going to be going to the United States?
Oh, we were ecstatic. When we learned of the official date to be deported to America. But I also remember looking out of the plane window, feeling sad for many people who were still there, not only in this particular camp, but so many more camps with hundreds of thousands of displaced people who would do anything to be in our place.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about these photos?
Yes, so the first photo is of me and my siblings in the Philippines in 1987. The second photo is of my whole family, or most of my family members, and with our American Red Cross friends who were working at the camp. There we were waiting to go to the airport that will take us to the US. I'm the only one not smiling because I was sad to leave my friend.
Which one is you in the one of your siblings?
I'm the youngest girl with that dress on.
So you're in the front, I believe?
Yes, in the middle front, yes.
Yeah. And it's pretty clear which one you are in the photo on the right, because you really are the only one not smiling.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the first photo I was bottom I guess, left to me. And then, yeah, the second photo was in the middle front.
With the pink dress.
Yes.
Looking a little sad.
Very sad.
So what was the first thing you noticed when you got off the plane in the US?
So in October of 1987, we arrived in Rhode Island. Our sponsor, who was my mother's nephew, met us at the airport. The lights and sounds and the displays at the airport were overwhelming. As soon as we got our belonging, we rushed, to the cars that were awaiting us. There were all kinds of familiar food waiting for us, prepared by our sponsor family at their home, and we feasted with the adults and the other kids. By the end of the night, when we started to settle in, my mother asked for my youngest brother, and not until then did we realize he wasn't with us. Yeah, the adults got into their car and raced back to the airport to look for my brother. They found him waiting with a police officer in the airport, not speaking a word of English. Apparently, during the excitement and the rushing into multiple cars, my little brother wandered off to look at the fish tank. And yes, we left him in the airport by accident, of course.
Well, it sounds like you found him and everything turned out okay. What was the adjustment like for you and your family?
We went through different stages. It felt surreal at first, like it was a dream, that we actually made it to the US, the land of opportunity, followed by excitement, having a bed to sleep on, a toilet that flushes, and tasting pizza and touching snow for the first time. I remember going apple picking. It was the best time of my life.
Oh.
All you can eat. You see, back then, you see, apples in Cambodia was like gold. I tasted an apple once in Cambodia, and I think apple was my reason for wanting to come to America. So, but then reality hit. My family was on our own. How are my parents going to find, a job? Our sponsor has limited resources and ability to help us.
What did your family do at that point? Where did you end up going to school? What helped you to feel like you belonged?
We briefly stayed with our sponsor family. Between my family and them, 13 people in a 3-bedroom house was a bit too cramped, according to the American standards. My parents had to find work pretty much immediately. My family was fortunate because my parents learned some English back in Cambodia, and they both were educated. But regardless of the education level, most refugees start at an entry-level position, which means my parents needed more than one job, each to sustain the family.
What happened next?
So we moved to a 3-bedroom apartment, south side of Providence, which you can see in this the first photo here. The second photo is of me, my sister, and my father trying on clothes that were donated to our family. The third photo is of my 2 sisters taking at one of our favorite American outing, apple picking.
And apples were like gold, huh?
Yeah, indeed. Then we immediately registered for school, and I entered the 4th grade in an ESL class, unable to speak, read, or write English. That was the beginning of my formal education. Surprisingly, I did really well. I was a very good student, honor and high honor student in middle school. I did well enough that I skipped 7th grade and got to classical high. And then it all fell apart for me in high school. I wasn't interested in studying as hard anymore. I was consumed with trying to fit in. going out and wanting to date. I was being defiant, according to my parents, who was extremely, extremely strict, especially with the girls, the daughters. So because my parent had to work multiple jobs and long hours, which meant leaving us, the children, to navigate growing up in the US with very little supervision, they felt they were losing control as parents. They would say, you wouldn't be acting this way if we are able to discipline you like the way we discipline children in Cambodia. So, but my parents had, every reason to be concerned. Back then, in the late 80s, gang and teenage pregnancy were very prevalent, particularly where we live, the south side of Providence. Often kids, without guidance and support from their parents, their family, turn to their peers who may be gang members. And that was how many of my friends then got involved with the wrong crowd.
What did your parents do to ensure that you and your siblings wouldn't get involved with the wrong crowd?
Once they save enough money and with some guidance from our American family friend, they bought a little house in Lincoln to try to get us out of a place where they thought was a bad influence on us.
Okay. For those of you who are listening from outside of Providence, Lincoln is a suburb of Providence, fairly well off. So what was it like for you and your family living in Lincoln?
Well, little did my parents know, Lincoln had its own problem, and I didn't like it there. I didn't fit in with, white middle class kids. We were reminded how poor we were and how different we were compared to the majority. So we continue to struggle individually and as a family while my parents worked multiple jobs, struggling with language and cultural barriers, dealing with their own emotional and psychological trauma, and struggling to provide for the family. My siblings and I were left to do everything else necessary to survive and strive. We were told over and over again that if we work hard enough, we can achieve the American dream. But they don't take into account that school didn't understand us enough about our struggle to be able to help. We didn't have parents who could help with our schoolwork. We had to work part-time after school to supplement the family income. And we had to deal with issues like bullying and racism and navigating both home and school expectations.
Can you give us an example of some things that the school administrators did that showed that they just really had a lack of understanding of where you were from and who you were as a student?
Yes. So an example of the lack of understanding by the school teachers and administrators on how to help students like myself back then was speak English only policy. Only English was allowed in school, and it was the expectation that we should also speak English at home in order for us to be more fluent and to do better in school. And so naturally, you start to lose your first language or your native language or languages for some people and some refugees. And following the first language attrition, in my case, was my culture and identity.
Oh, wow.
So to say I struggled in high school in Lincoln was an understatement, but somehow I managed to graduate and was accepted to URI in a program called Talent Development.
So what was college like for you? What was that like?
Well, college years for me were filled with emotional and psychological growing pain. One day, walking to class from my dorm, a helicopter flew over my head, and I automatically ducked down, to the ground. And then at that point, I realized the awful part of my past was catching up to me, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. You see, my family, we didn't talk about our personal trauma collectively as a family in a way that was healthy and healing. We struggled individually. Um, but, I was able to seek out professional help, therapy on campus. And that was the time I did a lot of self reflection, and that led to healing for me. But it was very difficult and a very lonely time. It took me 5 years to get my BA in management information system, only to realize I did not want anything to do with it.
Oh no, what were you interested in doing instead of that for a career?
Well, instead, I got into education, social work, community development, and became involved in a nonprofit organization that made up of doctors and local Cambodian members and leaders in Providence. We helped raise funds in Rhode Island to build the first library in one of Cambodian's provinces.
Did you go back to Cambodia?
I did. So I went back in 2013 to help with the projects for the nonprofit organizations I was involved with. The first photo is of me in front of Angkor Wat, one of the seven wonders of the world. I am proud to say that as Khmer. The middle photo was me speaking to a group of school children who we built the community library for, and it was the first library in their village. They never had a library before, and they were so excited to go to a place, with all kinds of books and borrow them. The concept of a library didn't exist for them prior. So, and the third photo was of the children holding books that were hand delivered by me for their library. It was the most rewarding job for me, and ironically, going back to the place my family tried so hard to escape was healing for me. Going back to reconnect with my homeland and the work that I did helped me understand my purpose and helped me to have a better understanding of my identity.
That's a really powerful. That's a really powerful part of your story. That part of your healing was actually returning to the place that you had left and being able to see people there, being able to experience life there again, and also to be able to help. I wonder in what ways, if any, has being a refugee affected other major life decisions for you?
I often thought about, have I achieved the American dream for all that my family gave up and endured? Am I living the life intended for me? Introspection, reflection is ongoing for me, and I do want to be involved and help disadvantaged, disenfranchised communities in some way, while helping my children understand that their world is so much bigger, and I am intrigued to see how they see themselves in this world.
For our viewers, I'd just like to remind you that Maliss is our consultant for our refugee youth program. And as a person who came to this country as a refugee, as a teenager herself, she has a lot to offer these young kids who are perhaps struggling with some of the same issues that she struggled with. Maliss, what do you think Americans should know about refugees that would help them to be more welcoming and supportive?
Well, first of all, dealing with trauma, post-traumatic stress, and grief of leaving family behind or losing family members are just a few emotional, psychological factors that challenge us as we try to adjust with our, new life in our new homeland. Adjustment is very hard, and refugee families may go through stages that may start with them being excited only to realize that their hopes and dreams have faded. They are still living in poverty. The American dream isn't what they thought. the reality of adjusting and transitioning into the new way of life in America isn't as easy and idealistic as they thought or were told. This sentiment, of if you work hard enough, you will achieve your American dream is not, for me at least, accurate. Not all refugees are afforded the same or equal opportunities. If we don't have access to resources, higher wages, upward mobility, good and affordable education, healthcare, housing, then it doesn't matter how hard, we work. Um, so somehow, refugees family are resilient, time and time again, we persevere, maintain a positive attitude to move forward with our goals, regardless of setbacks. I never felt I belonged to any particular group, but at this point in my life, I have accepted that I am different. My personal and family struggles made me who I am today, and I think I am much better at toggling between my Khmer and American identity.
So we have, before we end, we have just 2 final photographs here. Maliss, do you want to tell us a little about these?
Sure. So the first photo is of myself and my 4 siblings in the Philippines in 1987. And the second one, we stood in the same order with our children in Rhode Island in 2015.
So you're on the bottom left in the photograph on the left. You're the little girl on the left, and you're the young woman on the left in the bottom with the 2 babies. Is that right?
Yes, my twins, Sarika and Devi.
I believe you said their names at the beginning of this presentation.
They are the reason why I am sharing my story.
And they're listening in right now, I believe, right?
Yes, they are.
So can you tell us a little more about the picture on the right?
So this is of my sibling and I, the same order with our children, very proud of where we are at this point in our lives. So these photos are a testament to my parents, sacrifices. 4 out of the 5 children managed to finish college with a BA and a couple of us with a master. Our career included nursing, anthropology, finance, social work, and education. 2 of us live in Rhode Island with our mother. My oldest sister is in Hawaii right now, and second sister in California. And my older brother and my father are in Cambodia.
What an extraordinary story, Maliss. Thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. And this is part 2 of a 2-part series Maliss shared earlier last week about her experiences fleeing Cambodia. And this week, of course, she's sharing about her life in America. If you'd like to see the recording of the interview she gave last week, you can find that on social media. So you'll be able to really connect this week's story with last week's. So thank you so much. We are really privileged to have had you here for the time that you were with us. And for those of you who are watching, if you have any questions for Maliss, please enter them into the chat. And I also invite you to leave your email as well so that I can add you to Beautiful Days newsletter list so you can receive updates on sales and all the latest news and learn more about our refugee trainees and our programs. So that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon. Good night.
Thank you, Rebecca.